welcome to Friday Night Bytes, our second episode.
Episode number 2.
They have not canceled us yet.
On YouTube, I think that's a takedown notice, and I hope we don't get into that territory on here.
Well, you're hanging out with Scott Risdall and yours truly, Jordon Darling. We're here to talk about information security stuff and food. You know, despite what you maybe thought about the steak that made your mouth water at the beginning here, we're not just talking about food. This is to whet your information security appetite as well.
There you go. Well said. Yeah, there's a lot of InfoSec podcasts out there, and so we thought we'd shake it up a little bit, shake and bake, and talk about some local Minnesota eateries too, and maybe some points abroad if you or I travel at some point to somewhere we'd like to share with the folks. But yeah, so the Twin Cities cuisine scene and some InfoSec. So typically in that order.
Yeah, and we are qualified to give you food advice. We are expert chefs as well as expert information security professionals.
I eat almost every day, so I consider myself an expert in this field, in both fields, more or less.
Same here. Yes, I mean, I'll tell you what I think.
Do you think it's time to talk about some food real quick?
Let's talk about some food. My choice this week, and this is the first time we're talking about it, right? So this is what I'm leading off with. All right, I'm teeing it up because I took my wife on a date to this place. This place was recommended by a TikTok person that I follow. If you guys do the TikTok, I'm not allowed to admit that I do it because I'm an information security professional.
I was going to say something.
But hey, anyways, I got some advice from this TikToker, and I checked it out. Took my wife there. It's called Legendary Spice.
I've got it up on the screen here. I'm looking at the menu right now. It looks good. Tell us why it's worth a trip.
So I'll tell you why. Okay, so it's located in the Wahoo apartments on Huron Boulevard, by the U of M campus. I think there's another one. You know, when we were kind of looking at the websites, is there like another one on University or something?
With a similar name, I think. I don't know if it's the same, but it might be like Legend of Spice or Wahoo Spice, or I forget. I won't try to find it right now. But
anywho, it's where the young folks hang out, and look, they have this thing called hot pot. You know what hot pot is?
I do. I've had the pleasure of hot pot. It's sort of a make your own in front of you experience where they bring the hot pot, or the hot pot sometimes is built into your table even. I've seen that, and they kind of add the things, and it boils, and it's very fresh. It all happens right in front of you, and then you get to eat it right there. Is that close?
Is this your choice or is this mine?
Okay, I'm backing off. Continue.
But you're exactly right. That's exactly what it is. It's kind of like an Asian fondue. And you're right. They have this little portable. At least this place has a portable gas stove that they bring out with a hot pot. They heat it up. They get it ripping hot with this like soup in it. You get to choose kind of what the soup is. So it's like this broth, and you get to choose what it is. And then they get it ripping hot, and then you get to select meats, veggies, noodles, and all this stuff. They bring it all out to the table, lay it out in front of you, and you cook it up yourself. You just cook it up right there and eat it. And it's a fun experience. You know, there's a little bit of a learning curve with it. It seemed a little bit more challenging than like the fondue, because you're kind of holding these things with like, they got a ladle, you got chopsticks, but you know, at the end of the day, you cook it up, and you can just kind of eat it, or you can put it into a bowl and like eat it like a soup, and it's really good, and the experience, so it's not necessarily a place that I will frequent, but it is a place that I would probably go, take someone who's visiting. It's a fun little experience, fun for a little date night, fun for a group to kind of sit around and do all that together. But it is tasty for sure. So um, I
Okay.
would say check it out.
Yeah. Yeah, it looks good. I just finally scrolled back up to the hot pot section, and they've got the spice ratings. You get to pick your protein. It's always a good sign, I think, at Chinese restaurants when the Mandarin or whatever characters are first and foremost featured, and then it sort of says in parentheses almost, here's what that means.
Yeah,
I
exactly.
feel
Yeah,
like
you got to
that's a
be
good
careful.
endorsement.
You got to be careful if you don't know what you're ordering because it's the real deal. It's got that and at the end of the day, my wife was satisfied,
That's all you can ask for.
and that's all you can ask for.
And they got some sort of cute little panda bear branding here that would look good on a tapestry on your wall.
Yeah, yeah.
Cool.
So go to the U of M campus, check out like a Gopher game, and then go have a little hot pot.
Sounds good. My choice is the Blue Door Pub or series of pubs. This is a local chain, if you want to say that, here in the Twin Cities. And there used to be, I want to say, three or four of them. There used to be four. I'm looking at it right now. The Lynn Lake location and the St. Paul location are temporarily closed, which is a bummer. But
Yeah.
there's one over in kind of southeast Minneapolis, and then there's one on Como Ave in, I guess, sort of east central Minneapolis. Um, so, a couple locations. Why am I recommending the Blue Door? The Blue Door. Okay, so first, a little bit of backstory, right? Do you know what a Juicy Lucy is?
I definitely know what a Juicy Lucy is. There's a couple other uh, restaurants locally that also would hang the Juicy Lucy tag on their
That's right.
restaurant. But yes, do you want me to explain it? I know what it
Um,
is.
I stole your hot pot thunder, so why don't you tell people about the Juicy Lucy?
The Juicy Lucy is when you stuff your beef patties with something, usually cheese. Like that's kind of the original. Is like a cheese filled uh, patties, two patties put together. They seal up that cheese right inside, so it's like a stuffed. It's like a stuffed burger, and but they people get really creative with it. I imagine this place has some creative things, right?
They do. Yep. So they call their Juicy Lucy's the Belusi, Blucy,
Because of the door.
because of the door and the name and the trademark, I suppose. Um, but you're exactly right. It's a burger with usually two patties and then cheese or some other things stuffed into the middle and then cooked. So you get it, and it's just kind of this like, savory pie of a burger. So yeah, some of the ones they feature here are they put blue cheese and garlic inside, smoked bacon cheddar cheese and bacon
Mm,
inside. Let me find some of the more exotic ones here. The Cajun Redux with five pepper cheese mix, pepper jack cheese inside. Herbed goat cheese with garlic and blackberry sauce.
interesting.
Brie bacon jam and berry jamillo. I won't pretend to know what that is. The baked and loaded Colby Jack cheese, potato chips, bacon, and smack sauce.
What is smack sauce?
And last but not least, the Mount Blasuvius, which is the five pepper cheese mix, fried avocado, spicy bacon, and cilantro lime sauce.
Oh man,
That's maybe my favorite one.
everybody's so creative.
Yeah, I know. Um, so it's great. The prices are pretty reasonable. It's around $10 or $12 for the burger, and then everything else is a la carte. So they make really good fresh fries for like $3. They can do deep fried green beans for a little bit more. And they have a really good tap selection and everything too. So it's a great place to go. Just get a really good signature burger, chase it with a good local tap, and look at the blue door, I suppose. So
I think I might go there this weekend, and then that'll be my restaurant of choice next week.
your wife will be satisfied.
I mean, I need that extra help.
But that's a different podcast. Okay, enough about food for now. Uh,
Yeah. So what's the topic though? So we started off with a little bit of passwords, pass keys. We introduced people to pass keys.
We did.
And what's the next logical shift to talk about?
Yeah, well, in our continuation of not being especially creative or reaching very far for topics, we're talking about ransomware this week. Ransomware
Oh yeah,
is maybe the biggest buzzword in information security of the last few years, right?
right.
Um, Ransomware itself goes back a long time, and there's kind of a interesting and storied history going back to the dark ages of the 1980s or whatever, when viruses first sort of started making the rounds. But really, modern ransomware takes it to a whole nother level, and we're going to talk about why that is.
Great.
So, yeah, what is ransomware, Jordan?
What is ransomware? What is ransomware? Well, it is partially in the name. It's when a criminal gains access, gains enough access to prevent you from accessing your data. Oftentimes by means of encryption. Uh, but I guess it doesn't have to be encryption. I guess in many ways, as long as they can prevent you from accessing your data, that's kind of probably a piece of it. And then they request a ransom in exchange for, if they've encrypted your data, they'll request a ransom in exchange for the code to decrypt and give you access back to your data. And that's kind of basic. They hold your data ransom, and and then you're left there like Mel Gibson. Give me back my data. You know.
I didn't see that movie. Ransomware, uh, Passion of the Ransomware. I don't know. There we go. No, that's a really good overview. Yeah, and your emphasis on encryption is definitely on target. Encryption is cool and has all sorts of great uses, and everybody, non-technical and technical alike, use it every day, all the time without knowing it. Really every time you unlock your smartphone, every time that you do online banking, every time you buy something on Amazon, you are protected by something like the latest and greatest encryption technology, and it would be a scary world if that wasn't true, right? Um, but it can also be misused, like a lot of different tech can, to scramble and obscure data from people who do have a right to that data, which is kind of what you're talking about.
Mhm.
And so ransomware does exactly that. It finds the data it has access to. It uses some cryptographic algorithms to scramble that data in a way that's sort of mathematically impossible to reverse without that secret key. And then then they start the extortion process, right? Then it's just old-fashioned crime after all the cool technology is kind of out of the way.
Exactly. Yeah. Then they call you up with that voice, that muffled voice, and I have your data.
Is that always is it Liam Neeson? Does he call you personally? And
Pay me, pay me $1 billion in bitcoins.
yeah, okay, Bitcoin's good. That's a good segue here. So someone's on your computer virtually, maybe on your entire network, and they have used their nefarious and super cool cryptographic tools to scramble your data, and it's not recoverable typically. Um, how do they expect to get paid for this? Um, Especially considering that they might be halfway around the world, sitting on a Black Sea beach, for example, um, running these operations.
Well, I mean, through cryptocurrencies.
Another technology that has a ton of great potential and legitimate uses, but also gets misused for these sorts of activities. Um, yeah, and cryptocurrencies that might deserve a whole episode on its own. In fact, I have a book that I read a year or so ago that kind of goes through the long history of that, so maybe we could talk about that in depth. But um, why do cryptocurrencies make a great payment method for this, just at a high level?
Well, because it's secret.
It's secret, so it's another way to
It's
say
hard to
that is,
trace.
yeah, it's hard to trace, and it's not tied to a named individual, I guess
Right.
is maybe one way to put it. So each Bitcoin wallet is a what looks like a hexadecimal string, right? Just a random string of characters of a certain length. And that's all on the surface anyway that is visible um, about a wallet or a holder of cryptocurrency, right? Um, so when they're holding you for ransom, they will typically display a wallet, a Bitcoin wallet maybe, or something, another blockchain, and then they expect the random end user, non-technical person to just know what to do with that? Or how does that usually go?
Well, I mean, we'll get into some of these topics. I think throughout this episode, maybe, or in other ones. But I mean, some of these folks they have their own customer service, and they'll be happy to walk you through how to pay them.
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. So just like any other good online business, they have their own tech support department that can ensure that they get paid.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll get into that. What
Okay.
I want to know though, before we get into that, is Scott. Let's say they've taken my data ransom. All right,
Hmm.
they've encrypted it, and I say, "Nah, buddy, I'm not paying you." Whether I'm just kind of being being stubborn, or or maybe I have great backups, and it's like, I'll just recover from my backup, and
Sure.
I say no, or don't respond. I would say don't even respond, don't communicate. But what is are they just out of luck? The ransomware criminals, are
Um,
they give up at that point and say, "Oh shucks, it didn't work this time, boys."
yeah, they. I'm sure that's what happens, and then they pull the mask off, and then it's old man Wilkins or whatever, and he complains about those meddling kids, and the
Oh,
episode is
rats.
over. Oh, rants. No, they don't do that. Maybe 10 years ago they did. Maybe it was kind of a one and done single stage attack, but no more, right? Now there's double and even triple extortion that can
Triple extortion.
triple, I know. So let's talk about that. So double extortion. So first of all, they have your data encrypted. You can't get to it. It's still there on your computer, but it's been scrambled by military grade encryption. You can't even call in the NSA and have them help you or whatever. So, but like you said, not everyone is has only one copy of their data. So then, what the attacker might do is say, "Okay, you're not going to pay to get it back, but what if I throw some of it up on the dark web or even on the public internet, where anybody can see it? What if I dig through the data that I might have downloaded from your computer, right, before it was encrypted, um, and uh, and go through that and find something of value. Maybe your company's financials, maybe some embarrassing photos you took after a few too many local taps at the Blue Door pub. Um, so now they have another angle on you, which is, well, you can get your data back, but maybe we'll show it to some other people that you would not like. And so the threat of putting sensitive personal or company data out there for everybody to see might be enough to get you to pay up after all.
Right. Yep. Yep. Yeah, because you don't want to be embarrassed. I mean, whether it's stuff you don't want people to see, or just, I guess people knowing that you got breached too. It's like you want to kind of maintain your reputation, so they're banking on
That's a
you
good
trying to
point.
protect something like that.
Yep. So they might keep it between you and the attacker, victim and attacker at first, because they have no reason, unless they don't get paid, to take it farther. But then, yeah, if they can name and shame you too, that's a totally another. Maybe that's triple extortion, and then
Right.
we can even talk about quadruple extortion, which I would say is the practice of. I just had it, now I lost it again. Do you remember what the last one is? Um, the reselling of access. Remember we talked about this
Right. Yeah.
off camera. So they got into your system somehow, right? I have the article from the Register that we read up on the screen here, and it mentions, just as one of many possibilities, exploiting a specific vulnerability in a firewall, right? To gain that initial access, and then moving in to find out what they might be able to encrypt and steal and ransom. Um, so, but yeah, so somehow they found a way into the network, right? Whether that's guessing passwords or stealing access tokens, or buying credentials off the dark web, maybe whatever it is. There's a million ways to get into somebody's network, but they have that access now. And so maybe if you don't pay for the data, and maybe you don't even pay for having it not show up online, then they can just say, well, we're going to sell your network access to somebody else. Or maybe they don't even tell you that. Maybe that's not worth informing you because that would ruin the value of it.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Now they're making money off the people, by selling it there. Yeah.
and here's the thing, right? What's These aren't mutually exclusive arrangements, are they? They could do all of these.
Oh,
They
yeah.
could have you pay to get the data back. They could have you pay more to not post any of it online, and then they could even have you pay more not to share information about your network, vulnerabilities, attack paths with the rest of the criminal underworld online. Um, Maybe you have to pay 3 times.
I mean, we got to remember these are thieves. These are thieves. Now, I think, nowadays there are some uh, gangs out there, ransomware gangs that, are trying to have a decent reputation in order to encourage people to pay the ransom. If everyone thinks that, oh, if I pay this ransom, you're just gonna, you're not gonna, it's, then there's less chance that you pay the ransom. So they might try to kind of prop up their reputation a bit. So what's this article that we're looking at here?
Yeah, so this one zeroes in on a specific ransomware group. So that's something we haven't really mentioned yet, I think, but um,
Although we do have an episode coming up
we do.
that dives into lots of groups.
I think it's the next one. I think it'll drop next week.
Mhm.
This, and we actually, I think we're going to talk about this group, which is called Hive. And this article is a little older. This is from last November, so 2022. And it just kind of gives a high level overview of the Hive ransomware group, how much money they've extorted from people, how many different victims they have around the world, and we can dive into the details a little bit. But I do just want to revisit this concept of ransomware groups. Um, Tell me a little bit, Jordon, what makes a ransomware group, and what's kind of their business model? We talked about charging for extortion, but how do they actually operate?
Right, right. Okay, so I suppose, some ransomware groups, they operate as a service. So it's what, Hive would be one of those. They're considered ransomware as a service. And so it's just like any other cloud service you might sign up for, but you can essentially sign up to use their ransomware and attack whoever you want, and they'll support it. They'll you know you buy it from them. They just kind of license it out to you or whatever, and now you can use that to so now anyone can attack anyone. You don't even have to be an expert. You can just be a little kid that wants to, disrupt the school and then go pay Hive and then deploy this, advanced ransomware, stuff and yeah, they'll so they operate kind of like that. They're like a service. And
Sure.
and you know and well, I can't remember if we go into this uh in the next episode, but I mean, some of them they operate just like an organization. They got. I was thinking about the lockbit. We'll go into that a bit, but um, I just had heard this the other day at a conference that they have a refer a friend program. You refer someone to use their lockbit 3.0 or whatever, and you get a little bit of a
Get a little
you know,
kickback?
little kickback.
Ah, that's crazy. That's insane. Yeah, everything's as a service these days, from your Microsoft licensing to um, your Hello Fresh home meal delivery service. They want to get that recurring revenue,
Hmm.
yeah. So I guess it's not surprising that the ransomware community, if you want to call it that, has jumped on the bandwagon. Um, Okay, so there's kind of that disconnect. So there's groups that maybe build the software and support it, and then there's the affiliates, as I think they're called,
Yep.
who actually
Customers.
license the illegal, horrible ransom software, and then use it in turn on their specific targets. So it's kind of a division of labor that maybe is a benefit to everybody, right? The actual authors keep some distance from the crimes, and the people who want to launch the attacks don't. The cost for entry, like you said, is really low. So it's great business model.
Right.
Okay, so
Where
that's
do I sign up?
right. Yeah, we'll put some links in the show notes if people want to start up their own little.
My my grandma made me mad. I gotta send her some ransomware.
So back to the Hive. So
Poor
this is
grandma.
up on the screen. It's been up on here for a while. People have probably read it while we were rambling on.
Mhm.
So again, as of middle of November of last year, Hive ransomware group had hit more than 1,300 companies globally and extorted over $100 million. And so that's in the last 8 months before mid-November. So going back to maybe just the first couple months of 2021. That's not a lot of time. And how many companies made $100 million in an 18-month period in the last 3 years?
Right.
Zoom did, a few others did, but I mean that's a ton of money. That's very successful business.
Yeah, and I don't remember. Is Hive on the next episode when we dive into them?
It is.
Are they the ones that the FBI actually made a little bit of progress, kind of infiltrating?
Yeah, yeah. So looking at scrolling down in this article, there's a link to a joint advisory from CISA, which is part of Homeland Security, and then the FBI, um, sharing indicators of compromise and kind of indicating that this is a prime target for the FBI for a takedown operation. And let's leave it until the next episode to get into that. But yeah, these guys seem to have painted a target on themselves.
Yeah,
So maybe that dollar figure isn't surprising. Um,
maybe because it looks like they've been going after some pretty high end things, critical infrastructure, hospitals,
yep.
been used in those kind of things.
Yeah. So they've made some waves, and the powers that be noticed. Um, let's see. We talked a little bit about affiliates. We hinted at kind of how the attackers, ransomware groups or affiliates might get into a network. Do you want to say anything more about that? I think my
Um,
my main thing, real quick, is
yeah,
just that it's not special, right? These
right.
these aren't wizards. These aren't cutting edge hackers. In a lot of cases, they're using the same techniques that anybody uses to get into a network. They're stealing passwords. They're buying compromised accounts. They're exploiting vulnerabilities that are multiple years old and have had vendor patches available for years, right? None of this is magic. It's just at that point sort of a crime of opportunity. You find a network that's poorly secured or a user who's not being vigilant about what they click on or whatever, and this is one possible outcome. Um,
Yeah, exactly. And uh, in the case of Hive, you look at that, and and the article kind of talks about like they broke into networks using stolen single factor RDP logins and VPN, and so remote access to the network. So some of this, it's also just kind of basic like fundamentals. Like if you're gonna have remote access portals accessible from the internet, the public internet, and you don't have multi-factor authentication. We talked about that last week.
mhm.
That's just a basic fundamental that you need to protect that. And also, like you said, vulnerabilities. What you want to dive into? Kind of like break down what a vulnerability is.
Yeah, I think we'll do a future episode on vulnerabilities, and we'll highlight a couple of the big ticket ones from the last few months here. There have been some amazing ones that I think we'll talk about in Microsoft Exchange, in Fortinet products, in Microsoft Outlook. I think one is just dropping this week here in March. But yeah, in general, a vulnerability is just it can be a lot of things, but it's kind of any weakness in an IT system. Could be software, could be firmware, could be hardware, um, that that can allow for you know, um, I guess to go back to the textbook, to allow somebody to compromise confidentiality, integrity, or availability of information
Right.
systems, right? So the ones that get talked about generally are vulnerabilities in applications and systems that are connected to the internet that are hanging out there, and so somebody discovers some flaw in the software, some application design mistake, or it can be a lot of different things. But then so attackers discover this, and then they realize it can be misused to gain initial access into a system, and then from there, you go through the sort of attack chain, as they call it, to go do whatever it is the ultimate goal is for that attack. Ransomware could be a good example, but yeah, that vulnerability or those vulnerabilities are just those flaws that attackers can find and misuse to gain access to a system.
Yeah, and I heard a stat the other day that, and maybe I have the stat a little bit wrong, but and I'll make it better in the next episode maybe. But I want to say it was uh, there's on average there's a flaw in the code for every 300 lines of code there's a flaw, and so you think of these applications and they have hundreds of thousands of lines of code, which
Sure.
means that they have lots of flaws.
Yeah,
And it's just,
thousands of flaws.
yeah, it's just the way it is, which is why updates have to come out every month, week, which is why we have 0 days, is because people find these because they're there. Codes are written by humans, and and they just are there.
They are. It's just a reality, and it's you know 10, 15, 20 years ago, when people started really tracking vulnerabilities as kind of a discipline and a research area of research, they started giving them sort of signifiers, unique identifiers, right? CVEs are common identifiers for vulnerabilities. And I remember like back in 2008, there was a vulnerability in Windows. It was MS 08067. I don't know if you remember that one, but it was kind of one of those like OG like click to pwn, like direct to super user type vulnerabilities that you did across the network. Every Windows system in the world was vulnerable at one point. Um, but the identifier was in Microsoft's parlance MS08 067. And so '08 was the year that it was disclosed, and '067 was the number of vulnerabilities that Microsoft had addressed and patched and reported on in that year, right? If you look at a CVE today, it's there's 5 digits now. So we're talking up to 99,999 vulnerabilities getting reported, and that's just going to keep going up. So as there's more software and more
And
people
these are
looking
the
for
ones
those
that they
flaws.
found. These are the ones that
Exactly,
they found. Like there's
exactly.
ones that they haven't found yet.
Yep, yep. And so then you get into the concept of a 0 day, which we can define real quick. Do you want to say what a 0 day is? A 0 day vulnerability?
Yeah, and that's when they discover this vulnerability, uh, and it's significant enough. There's not necessarily. It's like patch now. It's like you got 0 day notice. And I guess it doesn't necessarily mean there's an exploit, does it? Or is that
No, I think it doesn't necessarily mean that. It's usually strongly implied because that's why people care.
right?
As we're saying, there's tens of thousands of vulnerabilities identified and hopefully patched every year now. Um, but it really makes the news when it starts getting attacked. So
Right.
you hear the phrase exploitation in the wild, right? So not only are these vulnerabilities known about, but they're getting attention from attackers. Yeah. So yeah, so a 0 day. I think the explanation I always hear is that it's a flaw is learned about, and then there have been 0 days since that disclosure, right? So there's
Right.
been precious little time for anybody, the defenders, the vendor who needs to make a patch, to learn how to respond.
And it's important, it's kind of saying like it's important that you address this because now, if attackers didn't know it was there, now they do. Now it's public knowledge that the good guys are telling you we have
Yep.
a flaw, patch it.
Yep. And and this has become such like a systematic process now that oftentimes vendors will release a patch before a vulnerability is known about, right? Let's say in Microsoft Exchange. So Microsoft releases a patch. The bad guys will grab that patch, right? Or they'll grab the files in the operating system or in the application involved, and they'll diff them, right? They'll figure out at the level of code what's changed by the patch, right? And then they'll say, oh, I can reverse engineer that and I can turn that into an exploit. So something gets announced, patched, oftentimes, and then within a few weeks or maybe a couple of months, you start hearing about exploitation in the wild because the vendors basically told people with the right set of skills that there's something of value here. And unfortunately, as you and I both know very well, not every organization applies patches when they first become available. Some wait years to apply important patches. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the next
Yeah,
episode too.
and some make the news uh, for patches that have been around for a while.
This is true. This is true. So,
We'll
so
get into that's a little teaser.
a little teaser, a little tidbit. Um, so let's see. I'm looking at our notes here and trying to see if we've missed anything. That's a pretty good overview of ransomware. Do you want to talk a little bit about just kind of common sense preventative steps, or like,
Yeah,
so this thing is terrible, it can happen to anybody. What can people start to do to lessen their chances of being a victim?
yeah. Let's ride this horse home here. So, well, you have the FBI advisory there. They give you
Yeah.
some tips. So just like what we've been talking about, remediating known exploited vulnerabilities. Prioritize that. So if there's a 0 day, you know, pay attention and patch it. When critical patches are released, make sure you're updating your stuff. A lot of things get updated automatically, right? But maybe for the average everyday person, um, you know, just know enough to know like that's not just automatic. Like don't try to understand that like those updates are important and they're automatic, yes, so you can kind of set it and forget it to some extent. But man, I don't know if you notice that updates aren't coming through or something. Like this is what we're talking about is these vulnerabilities that can be leveraged. Um, and like we talked about last time, MFA, pass keys, strong passwords, combination of both. Uh, these are things that are going to help protect you. Um, backups or something, that it's not mentioned in the article there, but it's like that's step one. If you make sure you can get to your data, you just thwarted their plan A, so to speak, and then they're going to move on to plan B, and so maybe another point would be don't don't have embarrassing things that they're going to share. Uh, but of course, we're talking for businesses, we're talking client data, we're talking whatever. And oh, side note, if I can side note,
Please.
if you do get compromised and they are going to release this stuff, like for the love of God, like take ownership of this stuff and have like figure out a response plan. Like that's something that we're talking a little bit about preventative actions, but man, if you assume that you're going to get breached at some point in time, and a lot of people, a lot of folks in the industry say, like, you're breached already, man. Like, just like plan for it, plan for a breach. What's your next steps? And some people handle these things awful. Um, I know, like, I think the Minneapolis school district is kind of getting some criticism on how they've handled this recent thing. If people are aware of that, maybe we'll have an episode where we dive into that a bit. But it's like people notice when you're not responding to what I think people are kind of, I don't want to say okay with a breach, but at this point there's been so many breaches that people kind of get it, and now it's like, what are you going to do about it?
Right. Yeah, that tracks along with this sort of what they call the assumed breach mentality in cybersecurity, right? It's as a network defender, as an IT blue teamer, um, we're encouraged these days to not think that the things we put in place are perfect, and that the firewall keeps the bad guys out, or the antivirus software is going to catch all the bad stuff on the PC, right? Assume breach says it's probably going to happen someday. It's probably maybe already is happening and you just don't know it yet. So run your security program with that assumption made, right? So not just detection, not just building walls, but increasing observation, data collection, logging, endpoint monitoring. Just learn to look closely at the inside of your network, if that even exists anymore, um, and layer on those security protections and detective controls so that you can identify these things when they're inside the house.
Right. I mean, there's a reason why the NIST cybersecurity framework is identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. It's covering all the pieces that you need to do, and think about that.
Yep, I would agree. I was just scrolling through the FBI notice here about Hive, and we hit, I think, most of the points. And we'll, like we said, we'll deep dive into a few of these ransomware groups and kind of what tactics they use and where they're located and what industries they tend to target and so forth next time. So we don't need to steal our own thunder there. Is there anything else you want to leave the people with this week?
I don't know. Just if you're stopping by for the first time, thanks for being here. If you're checking us out for the second time, hey, continue on. We're hoping that this was valuable to the advanced folks, and hopefully we brought it down to a level that really anyone can kind of see how it applies and get some value from. So thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have more bits and bytes next week.
See you later.